my parents tried to force me into caring for my disabled brother forever, so I left the country and built a life where no one could control me. I've always been the scapegoat in my family. That's the only way I can explain my childhood without sugarcoating it. From the moment I was old enough to hold a spoon, my parents decided my role wasn't to be a kid, it was to be Ethan's shadow. Ethan, my younger brother, was born with severe disabilities, and from day one he was treated like the center of the universe. Every decision in our house revolved around him. Every conversation circled back to what Ethan needed, what Ethan wanted, what Ethan couldn't do. Meanwhile, I was told what I had to give up when I asked to go to a birthday party. My mom would sigh and say, "You know, we can't manage that. Ethan needs you here." When I wanted to join the school choir, my dad told me flatly, "That's not important. Your real responsibility is your brother." It wasn't said with kindness. It was drilled into me like a command. My childhood wasn't mine. It was an unpaid job I never signed up for. I'd watch kids ride their bikes down the street, their laughter echoing, while I sat inside spoon-feeding Ethan or making sure he didn't fall over. I was 8 years old the first time I remember thinking, "This isn't fair." But whenever I said it out loud, I was crushed with guilt trips. Do you want your brother to suffer? Do you want him to be alone? They acted like my basic desire to live my own life was a betrayal. The worst part is, I started to believe them. I began to think maybe I was selfish for even wanting friends or hobbies. Maybe my life really did belong to Ethan. But deep down, there was this small, stubborn voice that whispered, "This is more than chores. This is them trying to steal your entire future." And that voice only got louder as I grew older. I spent my teenage years watching my life slip through my fingers like sand. While my classmates were signing up for sports teams and after-school clubs, I was rushing home because Ethan needed me. I remember the sting of telling my best friend I couldn't make it to soccer practice Egmont because Mom said, "You're the only one he listens to." It wasn't true, but it was the excuse they always leaned on. By high school, the guilt-tripping became almost scripted. Any time I pushed back, my dad would lower his voice like he was giving a sermon. "He's your brother. Family comes first." And then Mom would add the dagger. "You're lucky you're healthy. Don't you think you owe him that much?" How could I argue without sounding cruel? So I swallowed my anger and let my dreams rot in silence. I watched classmates win trophies, perform in plays, and go to dances. I was home spoon-feeding Ethan or trying to calm his meltdowns while my parents pretended that was some kind of honor. The one time I did get a certificate for academic achievement, I came home beaming. Mom barely glanced at it before saying, "Can you take Ethan outside for a while? He's restless." That piece of paper ended up shoved in a drawer, forgotten. I didn't hate Ethan. How could I? He never asked for any of this. Sometimes he'd laugh when I read to him, and for a second I'd feel like a real brother, not a prison guard. But every time my parents used him as a weapon to strip away my choices. Resentment settled deeper in my chest. I didn't hate Ethan, but I hated what my parents turned me into. Graduation day was supposed to be my moment, the one milestone that proved I'd survived all the sacrifices and late nights of studying in between caregiving. I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, while my classmates' families cheered and waved. I scanned the crowd for my parents, hoping to see even a flicker of pride. But the seats where they were supposed to be sat, empty. Later, I found out Ethan had a minor health episode that morning. Nothing life-threatening, just agitation that passed within hours. But instead of making it to my ceremony, my parents stayed home with him. They didn't even call. I came back to the house, still wearing my gown, diploma tucked under my arm, only to be met with my father's flat voice. "You should have been here helping us. This whole graduation thing isn't important." I stared at him, stunned. Not important. I worked for this. I earned this. My mom cut in, her face cold. Your job is not college. Your job is your brother. The words hit like a hammer. My diploma felt like a worthless piece of paper in my hands. No congratulations, no photo on the mantle. No family dinner, just a lecture about how selfish I was for daring to think my achievements mattered. That was the first time the betrayal burned deep enough to scar. It wasn't just about missing one event, it was about the realization that my parents had already decided my future. My dreams of college, career, independence, they weren't mine to claim. They had assigned me a role I never chose: caretaker. Forever, and in that moment, a chilling thought rooted in my chest: if I stay, my life will never belong to me. It was a late summer evening when the trap finally became undeniable. I've just turned 18, and most of my friends were buzzing with excitement about moving into dorms or getting their first apartments. I dared to bring it up at dinner, just a casual: I've been looking at places near campus. The air went ice cold. My dad set his fork down, his eyes locking on mine with that heavy, unblinking stare. "You're not moving out," he said flatly, like it was already decided. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe he misunderstood. I mean, just for school. I'd still visit, still help Mom cut me off, her tone sharp. "No, Ethan needs stability. You're his stability." Any good sibling would know that. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a sentence. The gaslighting came thick and fast after that. "You're overreacting. You're lucky we trust you with him. Don't be selfish. Your brother will always need you." It was like they had a script, rehearsed and polished over years, designed to crush me into compliance. I sat there, nodding silently, while inside I felt the walls closing in. The idea of never moving out, never having my own life fit, was suffocating. Like someone had pressed their hands around my throat. That night, lying awake in the dark, I imagined myself at 40, still in that house. Still being told my worth was measured only by how much of myself I gave away. The thought made my stomach churn, so I did the one thing my parents never expected: started secretly saving money. A few crumpled bills from part-time jobs, tips I lied about. Spare change slipped into an old coffee tin. It wasn't much, but it was the first flicker of rebellion I'd ever allowed myself. And yet, every time I dropped $1 into that tin, guilt gnawed at me. Because no matter how much I resented my parents, one question haunted me: was I betraying Ethan by wanting to escape? I still remember the night I clicked submit on my college application. My hands were shaking, my heart racing, like I was committing a crime. I didn't tell my parents. I couldn't. This was my secret lifeline, my one chance to build something beyond the walls of that house. Weeks later, when the envelope came in the mail, my chest filled with a hope I hadn't felt in years. I'd been accepted with a partial scholarship. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to dream. That dream lasted less than an hour. I came home from work one evening to find the letter ripped in half on the kitchen table. My dad stood over it, his jaw clenched. "So this is what you've been hiding," he spat. "Planning to abandon your family." My mom's voice was sharper, cutting deeper than the paper edges. "You disgust me. After everything Ethan's been through, you think your life comes first? You're selfish." She shoved the shredded pieces into my hands as if to rub the failure into my skin. I stammered. This was my chance. I got in. I can pay most of it with the scholarship. Dad slammed his fist on the table. "You go, and you're cut off. No support. No family. Nothing." The threat was clear. Choose freedom, lose everything. Shock burned through me. Parents are supposed to want their kids to succeed, to push them forward. Mine had sabotaged me instead. They'd rather clip my wings than risk me flying away. That night, I lay in bed, clutching the torn letter, the ink smudged from my tears. Rage simmered under the grief, hardening into resolve. If they won't let me leave the right way, I thought, I'll find another way. It was pure accident that I found out. I was rifling through the desk drawer one afternoon, looking for a stamp, when I came across a thick envelope stamped with legal seals. At first, I thought it was just boring financial paperwork. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a document titled Special Needs Trust for the care of Ethan last name. My eyes skimmed the pages till they landed on my own name, written in bold ink. I froze. There it was, in black and white. I was legally designated as Ethan's future guardian, his caretaker, his provider, his permanent shadow. My parents hadn't just hoped I would take care of him, they had signed documents ensuring it, without ever asking me. Without even telling me, the room spun as I tried to process it. This wasn't just emotional guilt anymore. This was entrapment. They'd been planning this for years, weaving a net around me while I was still a teenager, ensuring that no matter what I wanted, I could never leave without being branded a monster. When I confronted them, the mask slipped. My mom's voice was icy calm. We did what was best for Ethan. You'll thank us one day. My dad's words cut deeper. You're his sibling. You don't get a choice. This is your duty. I exploded. I'm not property. I'm not your servant. You can't just sign my life away. My voice cracked with a mix of fury and grief, but they just looked at me like I was being dramatic, like a child throwing a tantrum. That was the moment it all clicked. I would never be free if I played by their rules. They'd built a prison for me, brick by brick. Wrapped in the language of responsibility and love, I went to bed shaking, the trust documents still burning in my mind. And as I stared at the ceiling in the dark, I made a silent vow. I'm going to escape this trap, no matter the cost. I tried one last time to reason with them, thinking maybe just maybe if I laid my heart bare, they'd understand. We were in the living room. Ethan was asleep, the TV humming softly in the background. My hands shook as I said, I deserve my own life. I love Ethan, but I can't be his parent forever. I'm his sibling, not his jailer. For a second, there was silence, and then my dad's face twisted with rage. How dare you say that? After everything we've done for you? Mom's voice cracked like a whip. You're going to ruin Ethan's life. Do you even care what happens to him if you leave? He'll end up in some cold institution. You want that on your conscience? Their words poured over me like boiling water. I stood there, fists clenched, feeling the weight of every guilt trip they'd ever planted. Images flickered through my mind. Ethan reaching for me, my parents' disappointed stares, the endless nights of caretaking. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish. For the first time, I actually pictured it staying. Giving up college, giving up freedom, living out my days in that house as a permanent caretaker. No friends, no career, no partner. Just Ethan and me, forever. The thought left me hollow and trembling. I almost said yes. I almost surrendered. I could feel my knees buckle under the pressure of their voices, my own guilt echoing louder than my dreams. But then, something inside me broke. Or maybe it woke up. A flash of clarity cut through the fog, sharper than any guilt they could throw at me. But something in me snapped. After that night, I stopped arguing with them. On the surface, I played the obedient child they wanted. I nodded when they lectured me. I smiled faintly when they spoke about the future, and I kept my voice steady when they reminded me of my duty. But inside, I was making plans they would never see coming. The first step was reaching out to anyone who wasn't under my parents' thumb. I called my cousin Mark, a guy I hadn't spoken to in years. I remember whispering into the phone in the backyard, heart pounding as if my parents could hear through the walls. I need help, I said, my voice breaking. Mark didn't ask for details right away. He just said, "Whatever it is, I've got you." That was the first thread of hope I'd felt in months. I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, lied about staying late at school, and pocketed cash wherever I could. I worked weekends, cleaned neighbors' yards, anything. Every crumpled bill went into a tin I hid inside an old shoebox under my bed. At night, while my parents slept, I'd count the money with shaking hands. It wasn't much, but to me, it looked like freedom. The strangest part? My parents didn't suspect a thing. They were so convinced guilt had me shackled that they didn't even bother to watch me closely. They thought I was too broken to resist, too conditioned to disobey. That blind confidence became my cover. Still, there were nights I lay awake wondering if I was a monster. Ethan never asked for any of this, and in some ways I loved him more than anyone. But I couldn't be his prison guard forever. I couldn't survive like that, so, while everyone else my age was filling out college dorm checklists, I was filling out something else entirely. Quietly, in stolen hours at the library, I started applying for visas abroad, and once those applications were sent, there was no turning back. The night I told them I was leaving, the air in the house turned poisonous. I stood in the doorway of the living room, suitcase by my side, my voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "I'm moving out. I've made my decision." For a second, they just stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then the explosion came. My dad's face went red, his voice booming. "You're heartless. After everything we've sacrificed, this is how you repay us." My mom's eyes filled with tears, but her words were knives. "You're abandoning your family. You're abandoning Ethan. How can you live with yourself?" As if on cue, Ethan stirred from the couch, confused by the shouting. When he saw me holding the suitcase, his face crumpled, and he reached out toward me, whimpering. My mother pounced on the moment, clutching him dramatically. "Look at him. Do you see what you're doing? You're breaking his heart." The guilt slammed into me like a freight train. For a second, I almost dropped everything, almost knelt down and promised I'd stay. My brother's tears cut deeper than their words ever could. But then, like a wave crashing over me, I remembered the trust papers, the ripped scholarship letter, every stolen dream. This wasn't Ethan's fault, it was theirs. They were using him as a weapon, as they always had. I straightened my shoulders, my voice hard for the first time. "I love him. But I will not sacrifice my entire life because you've decided mine doesn't matter." My father shouted again. My mother sobbed louder. Ethan cried but for once. I didn't fold. I turned, walked down the hallway, and gripped the handle of my suitcase so tight my knuckles ached. That night, I left with only a suitcase and didn't look back. The plane ride felt like an out-of-body experience. I stared out the window as the city lights shrank beneath me, half expecting my parents to burst onto the runway and drag me back. By the time I landed in another country, my chest was tight with fear and adrenaline. I had no safety net, no one waiting at the airport with open arms. Just me, my suitcase, and the terrifying realization that I was free. The first weeks were brutal. I couldn't understand half the words on street signs, and even ordering coffee made me sweat with embarrassment. I lived in a cramped room I rented from a stranger, the paint peeling from the walls, the mattress stiff as cardboard. Some nights, the loneliness was unbearable. I'd cry into my pillow, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But then the mornings came, and with them, determination. I picked up whatever work I could, washing dishes in a cafe, handing out flyers on street corners, cleaning offices after hours. My hands blistered, my back ached, but every coin I earned was mine. No one could take it, no one could tell me it belonged to Ethan. Slowly, I began to carve out something resembling a life. I learned enough of the language to haggle at markets and joke with coworkers. I found a park where I could sit on Sundays and breathe without guilt pressing down on me. Each small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd been told didn't exist. For the first time, I didn't feel like property. I wasn't the family scapegoat, the reluctant caretaker, the invisible child. I was just me, and as I lay in my tiny room one night, staring at the cracked ceiling, I whispered the truth to myself. For the first time, my life was mine. Months passed before I heard from them again. My inbox had been blessedly empty of their voices, until one night, an email popped up with the subject line, "We need you." My stomach twisted even before I opened it. The message was exactly what I expected, long paragraphs about how Ethan was struggling, how the household was falling apart without me, how family duty never ends. My mom wrote, "He asks for you every night. Do you really want him to suffer because of your selfish choices?" My dad chimed in near the end, "You can run across the world, but you'll never escape who you're supposed to be." For a few minutes, the old guilt started to stir. I pictured Ethan's face, his confusion when I left. But as I reread the email, it hit me. They weren't reaching out because they loved me. They weren't even asking. They were demanding. It was never about me as a person. It was about control. Always had been. I typed a short reply. "I'm not coming back." Within a day, another message arrived. Shorter this time, nastier. My father wrote, "If you don't return, you'll be cut out of the inheritance. Don't expect a single dime from us." I laughed out loud when I read it. The sound startling even me. They still thought money was the chain that could drag me back. What they didn't realize was that I'd already broken free. I whispered to the empty room, half to myself, half to the ghost of their voices. I already inherited the one thing they could never take back, my freedom. It's been years since I dragged that suitcase out the front door and boarded a plane into the unknown. Sometimes I catch myself looking back, wondering if I made the right choice. But then I remind myself, Ethan is fine. Better than fine, actually. My parents were forced to do what they should have done all along. They hired professional caregivers. Ethan has structure, proper medical support, and stability that I alone could never have provided. The lie that only I could keep his world together finally unraveled. Meanwhile, I built a life of my own. At first, it was small, just a steady job, a rented room, a handful of coworkers who became friends. But over time, I carved out something beautiful. I learned a new language. I decorated my first apartment with things I chose. I even let myself fall in love. For once, every step forward was mine, not handed to me with strings attached. Do I still feel guilty sometimes? Of course, Ethan will always hold a place in my heart. But guilt doesn't run my life anymore. Love does. And the biggest difference is, now I can choose how to give it. I can choose where my energy, my time, and my care go. That choice makes all the difference. Looking back, I see now that leaving wasn't an act of cruelty, was survival. I didn't abandon Ethan. I abandoned a system designed to bury me alive under someone else's expectations. My parents called me selfish. But the truth is simple. Sometimes the bravest act of love is saving yourself. And if there's one thing I know for certain, it's this: I wasn't selfish for leaving. I was finally free.